Welcome back to another edition of Pimp My Ride! Welcome back to another episode on our Turbo Miata build. In today's episode, we start putting together the interior. I feel like I've been saying this for months now, just because, man, it's just been taking a long time to get this interior back together. I've already went ahead and started doing a couple different things. First off, heads up for anyone out there doing a dash swap. I've actually had to go through and do some modifications to my interior wiring harness. Some of the things just didn't line up. There's the center plug here. The previous owner had cut this plug out, so I had to reconnect it in here. There's also another plug underneath this dash. Man, this was terrible to do. That just didn't line up. It had extra row of clips on the male plug end and just didn't line up properly. So for anyone out there doing a dash swap, keep the wiring harness at the very least. Don't get rid of it until you actually do the swap. We are doing gauges. Also note, I think it's like a DDM. Yeah, DDM gauge holder surround. I don't know the name of it, sorry. But yeah, that's what I used here. And this radio, I made fit. It's off Amazon. And it like fits perfectly. Like, look at this. I actually had to Dremel the collar that was kind of around this area that pokes out. Let me show you what I mean. So you can see here, that's not the most prettiest job there, but it fits. And then I also had to sand it slightly. It was like 2 millimeters off, barely off to poke through. So I had to do it on the sides. But like other than that, I'm just so happy about how this fits. Like it just pops right through. We got a boost gauge, we got a Y-band gauge, we got an oil gauge. Very excited about this. This is just purely mocked up. I have also done the wiring for the radio already, and it seems to be working properly. First thing we're gonna do is work on wiring up these 3 new gauges here. Yeah, we're doing wiring, and it's neither of mine or Stefan's specialties. So we're going to be on the struggle bus here a little bit this episode. You've been warned. This is the Y-band, and it's got a specific plug that actually plugs directly in here, and it splits apart. We're going to save, like I said, this one for last. But they all have power and a ground that we got to line up. So what I think I'm actually going to start with is that for each one of these gauges, because we're actually going to pull from the same power as well as the same ground. So kind of do like a 3-in-1 here and just do them all at once. So here it is. I cleaned it up a little bit. It's still not great, but I'm pretty happy with it as a first attempt. I've got it all mocked up. It's a nest, but everything's plugged in, and I just wanted to test out the power to start with, because these two, boost and oil, are really easy. It's just, you know, volt and ground, but the Y-band has this dimmer wire, and I'm thinking that I just loop it into the same thing, so I'm not sure what it's going to do. Let's see. Hey! Alright. So we've got power running to both these two, and this is not working, which means, yeah, so there's an extra wire for the dimmer, so I think I'm going to just loop it into the same ones that these are. because I want them all to be the same. I don't want like these to be on all the time and this one only be on sometimes. I mean, I probably could loop them into the same circuit that the lights are on, so they would come on with the lights, but that's kind of complicated. And I know exactly what I'm doing, so it would be easy, but it's kind of complicated. So that's a victory. I just need to loop in that other wire, and I think we have powered everything.
Yes! Ah! Ah! Ah!
What I'm going to work on first is the most complicated. I want to save it to the last, the Y-band, but we're going to work on that next. Currently on the car, we have the sensor going straight into the ECU, and now we're essentially putting a gauge in between the two. Sensor, gauge, ECU. We've already run into a bit of a snag. Snag being this clip to my Y-band sensor is different from the clip that came with my gauge. And I think what we're gonna do is we're just gonna cut this apart and wire the new connector on here. I could go in and reinstall new sensor that came with the kit. The problem is it's really short, the connector, and I'd have to have the plug underneath the car. This is super clean. This plug goes straight into the sensor. There's no other connector underneath the car. Here's a sensor that came with my kit. So we see these 5 wires, same 5 that's in the car. I imagine, these sensors are interchangeable, pretty basic. I'm assuming, don't assume, kids, but in all seriousness, I mean, they do have the same colors in here, and I'd be surprised if there was any sort of difference because of that. It might even be made by the same manufacturer of that sensor. So this clip is what was different on my Y-band gauge. That's like an Innovations sensor setup, I guess you could call it, Y-band setup. This being Autometer, I think the gauges are different. I saw online, like one was Bosch, there was another one that's on there. Anyway, don't worry about that, it's probably wrong. We're gonna take this and put it into the current sensor that's in there, because I really do like the length of it. It's perfect, it comes right into the bay, and we're just gonna line up and connect these wires in there. From here, this clicks into this, which is going directly into the Y-band gauge. Now, I've already clipped it. It's just really long, so we're going to shorten it a little bit. But this ends here, which is what we've already been plugging into the back of the gauge. And then these 2 wires that come off, the ground and the signal, I've found those over in here. This is running to my sensor. This is the connector that's different from mine. It runs to this little box. This box is kind of clever. It splits the signal out so you can connect a computer to it, it looks like. I'm gonna have to delete that. Sorry, Stefan. And then out, we have 2 wires. One clearly running to a ground, and then one running up and over and into the ECU. So another assumption, kids. I'm gonna assume that one running in the ECU is the Y-band. I mean, it's gotta be. One of the reasons why it's a little vague is, if you guys know anything about this build, on the NA, when we did it last year, I was doing a lot of the production stuff at the time, and Stefan just did some of the buttoning up and certain projects without me there, so I don't really know parts of what were done to it. I do now. But yeah, so that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna start towards the sensor side and put this in and just kind of work our way into the ECU. Simple, right? It's gonna work, right? It's gonna work. Maybe. after connecting the new plug, I was able to snake this around the shifter and back here. How about them apples? This is gonna be nice and tucked in there, and that's why we're gonna need to trim the rest of it. So you can see here, this is what plugs into that, and it's just super long. I think it was probably close to 4 feet. We don't need it to go anywhere. Just gonna plug right in, and it's gonna go right from there to the gauge. So we're gonna trim this back a little bit. Moving along, I guess. We're getting close here with this Y-band, but the rat nest continues. We've got a couple extra wires here coming off the back of the plug. A blue wire that brings the information from the Y-band into the ECU. So that's the blue wire. We've got this brown wire here. What does this one do again? Looking for power from a different source. So I'm just gonna put this into the cigarette lighter. Just on like a, I don't know if it's on a different circuit from the ignition, but we're just gonna put it over there and hope for the best. And then we also have another ground. This ground they suggest putting into your data logger, or in this case, the ECU. And I don't really see why it would specifically have to go into the ECU. Currently, the sensor is set up so there's just one signal wire going in, and the ground splits off, doesn't even enter the ECU. So we're going to replicate that. Once we're done with those 3 wires, the Y-band should technically be functional. So now that we've got the majority of the Y-band ready to go, we're going to start doing the other 2 gauges. We kind of have to do everything at once because everything's connected. So first thing that we're going to tackle is the boost gauge. Now this is fairly straightforward. We have the ground and the power already wired in with everything else. So those 2 are done. This is just a clip for shipping purposes, and we don't need this in here, so you can just remove that. With that removed, all we have is now at the bottom here, which is just where the tube can come into. So right now in the car, the ECU actually takes the pressure from, I think we have the intake manifold and fuel pressure regulator connected, taking that atmospheric pressure that's in the intake and sending it into the ECU where it can read it. So we've already got that wired in, well, not really wired in, but we've already got that set up. So all I'm going to do is tee into that in the footwell. This side's going into the engine bay, this side's going into the ECU, and then we'll just take that and send this right into the gauge. Doesn't really matter, it's all going to be the same pressure. It's just going to now show me that pressure here, and it will reflect how much boost is in the system, or really how much pressure is in the system. Not bad. Woo! So this, in theory, will go here, attach in there. Ready to go into the car and tee this line in. I think that would be the best. Yeah, I think that'll be the best. Last gauge. It is our oil temperature gauge. Now this is going to be its own wiring. We're not going to be using anything that's pre-existing or anything like that, tapping anything. It's going to be its own wire and sensor. Over here we have the sensor itself. The kit was pretty sparse with what it came with. We've already, got the lighting for the off the ignition and the ground. It turns out we got to do the same thing down here with the ignition and the ground down here for the sensor, and then we also need to create a sender wire as well that's going to go to this sensor. Now, where I'm thinking about installing the sensor is we've got actually traded parts with Cam for this. This is an oil filter spacer, and we can tap into it right here and put the sensor in here and install it that way. If anyone else has any other good ideas on where I could grab the oil temperature from, let me know. I'm not going to fully install this today. If we end up going this route, we're going to be pulling the engine anyway, so we'll install it then. But I do want to run the wiring for the sender and basically just have it ready to install in the engine bay. I'm going to tape it up kind of out of the way. I might not even install this yet, this sensor, just because I don't want it to break or fall off during transit. But I at least want to get that wire through the firewall. I don't want to have to deal with that at a later date. These are the two splits that I added. They are going to go to the back to their correlating areas. I'm not going to plug them in, but you can use your imagination here. And then the sensor, I've got this made up with the loom and everything all ready to go. That'll also plug into the back, and we will go through the firewall back in here. And once we do this, we can actually install the center console. Oh my God! So, with the gauges and radio installed, we move to a couple more things to wire. I'm almost done wiring. We are going to be doing a horn button as well as a high boost button. Now, what's going on here? So, the horn, I tried to fix my center horn button on the steering wheel, but the ribbon wiring that was just in there was just too mangled to save it. And this is actually the solution that Cam and Stefan have had for quite some time. They have a different button itself, but they've actually designed and 3D printed an insert and actually mounted a horn button in their current cars. So I'm going to be doing the same thing with this, and I got the same button for high boost. What are we doing here? Well, I'm going to be running wastegate, I think probably around 7 pounds or so, and then when I press this button, it's going to go to an actuator, basically like a boost solenoid, and we're going to go from that wastegate pressure to however many PSI it takes to get 260. Probably around 12, 13 pounds. My reason for doing these two different boost settings is I want to be able to go to a track day, rip on the car all day, and not have to worry about breaking anything. We're really going to be taking it up to the ragged edge of what an engine and 5-speed transmission can hold with my current setup. After some looking around and researching and cutting wires and looking at everything, what we're really doing here is with the horn button, we've got the common and the voltage going to the same, and then the blue, which is the usually open circuit, going to the horn line wire, and then ground for the light. So that's what's going on here. Fairly straightforward. It's a little complicated because I'm trying to do two things at once. With the boost button, we are going to do the same thing, power and common, to a different power. This one's going to the cigarette lighter. This power is, there's a power that's like always on, because the horn, you can beep the horn at any time. You don't have to have the key in the ignition. So we're going to keep with the power on this one. This one, we're going to go power to that cigarette lighter. Same blue wire is going to go out to the solenoid, and then ground as well. And then with that boost control solenoid, we're going to have to do another wire to the ECU. Oh, surprise. I went ahead and did a lot of this off camera just for time's sake. This episode, I wanted to wrap the entire interior, and I forced it to happen. Got everything in now. So I put everything back together. The center console, the surround, even the seats are in. Aside from like assembling everything, a couple things that we did off camera was install some Alcantara boot covers. Not only is it like that Alcantara that kind of matches what we did on the door cards as well as the dash, but also red stitching to match the red door handles, which obviously just makes the car faster. I'm just really happy with how that turned out. Also, underneath the passenger seat, I installed a fire extinguisher. It's the same one that Stefan is running, and actually we learned about it from one of our previous reviews. A WRX track rat. Like, this guy just does so much time at the track with this WRX, and this is what he recommended just because of the size, and it's a little different. It's supposed to do an extinguisher like a classic, pull a pin and squeeze. It looks more like a road flare. And it's similar to that too. You strike it and it shoots for 60 seconds. Man, sitting in this car now after all this time, I'm super, super happy. There's definitely like a little things here and there. Looking at the dash, like I scratched a couple areas on the way in, which removed some of the flocking. Now you probably wouldn't notice it right away, but if you were looking for it, like I know where it is, so I see it all the time. Just be aware if you're gonna do that. It is delicate. You gotta be careful on like reassembly. Man, this is it. The interior is done at this point. There are gonna be a couple tweaks that I'm gonna do in a future episode, because like everyone knows, you're never done modifying your car. Next episode, ideally, is me gonna be porting and gasket matching all my turbo goodies. Max spools. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Boom.